be completely honest, Turo is a freaking disaster. This experience has been nothing but the worst. This is the second incident with a car in less than 6 months, and I gotta say that, I don't know, I guess I gotta tell you the full story.
Man, oh man. My venture of being a rental car operator is done. I had the worst experience ever, and to be honest, I don't see why anyone would want to be a rental car operator knowing what I know today. If you've been thinking about running a Turo operation, I think you need to watch this video so you know exactly what kind of disaster you're getting yourself into. In today's video, I'll cover my Turo experience and my final thoughts on who should consider Turo and if you should simply stay away from this rental car game altogether. On this channel, I discuss living globally along with business hacks in real estate and healthcare, showing you the path so you can do the same. If there's a hustle that seems promising, I also take the chance and share what I've learned so that you might be able to do the same. If this is the sort of content and information you want more of, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss a thing. My name is Carl Pierre, and this is ENTP Life. So one day I posted that buying a luxury car was one of the worst things that I ever did. So right out of college, I bought myself a convertible BMW, and my payment on that car was roughly like $1,000 a month for the payment and maybe $600 a month or $500 a month for insurance. Remember, I was right out of college, young, high performance car, so I got really hammered on the insurance side. And I realized that after having that car for a few years, that I spent enough money on the car payments to have bought another home. And from that point on, I made my mind up that one, I'll never buy a new car again, and two, it just doesn't make sense to have a luxury car because most of those cars' value eventually decreases to zero, the car goes out of style, and now you have a car that is hard to maintain, expensive to maintain, and worth pennies of, compared to what you paid for it. And I was like, this is just a bad idea. So when I made that post about my worst money decision, I got a few responses. The person's suggestion was that I go out, get a car that I really like, that I wouldn't mind driving from time to time, and all of the rest of the time, rent it out on Turo so that it pays for itself or even turns a profit. After thinking about it for a while, I said, you know what? I've seen videos about renting on Turo. I might as well give it a try and report back what my experience is. Bored, mid-pandemic, I wandered into the Porsche dealership and decided on buying this fire red two-door Porsche Cayman and thought this car could be my plaything and test it on Turo. I've done well utilizing Airbnb as a peer-to-peer rental business and thought Turo would be the same, and that's when disaster started. Now, the initial process of getting your car on Turo is quite easy. It's almost like Airbnb, and I knew that one of the most important things that I would have to do is build a reputation on the app and have outstanding photos that made the car look wonderful so that people would be interested in renting it for me. So I went out to my parking garage where my office was located, got professional photography, and the photos popped, perfect sort of setup. The Porsche was on Turo, ready for rental. First rental came in, cool dude, he was from Atlanta. He was into cars. He was just hanging out in Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. He never drove one of, he was like, I've driven every other Porsche except for the Cayman and I kind of want to see what it's like. Delivered the car back on time, totally positive experience. Second person who rented, again, totally positive experience. The only thing that I didn't like at that time was that the turnover process required me to meet up with someone, exchange keys. I was doing it at my office setting anyway, so I would try to kind of pick up and drop off while I was at my office, but it was still something that I had to make time to do and talk to somebody and whatever. I was like, I really don't like this part of the process. Then I would have to make sure the car was clean, turned over, which would cost me about $20 to $30 to do, and then ready for the next person. So I was like, man, this is a lot of work for such a little spread. I was only renting the car out for like $120 to $150 a day, and most of my rentals were like 2 to 3 days on the weekend. So it wasn't like I had the car earning $100 a day every day of the month. So I was like, man, I don't know if this is really worth it, and it's a lot of pressure on me to have the car ready. Then the third person rented. This guy was cool, picked up the car. This time I just left the keys inside the vehicle so that he could come over to the parking garage, pick up the car without ever speaking to me. I told him where it was, what spot number, everything was going smooth. Until one day, I get a phone call, and it's the guy saying, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but my wife just crashed a car. What? Wait a second, did she just crash a car? What happened? He was like, yeah, I was handling something and my wife went to take her mother or my mother-in-law out for lunch. They were pulling out of the garage and a motorcycle comes out of nowhere and T-bones the car. This dude on the motorcycle goes flying like 30 meters, skids. I'm like, oh my God. Not only did this person crash my car, but they hit somebody on a motorcycle. I was like, is the guy alive? He was like, yeah, the guy's good. He stood up, he walked away. He's like, you know what? The car isn't that bad. It looks like minor damage. It's only the front bumper cover. All right, he sends me some pictures and I was like, you know what? It actually doesn't look that bad. It looked like the front bumper cover was just torn off. We waited for 4 hours to try to get a tow truck. No tow truck showed up. This guy is like now frustrated, like what's going on? Turo said that there were a bunch of accidents for the day and they couldn't get a tow truck driver. They were switching tow truck drivers, whatever. Finally, the guy got frustrated and he decided to duct tape up my bumper, drive the car back to my home, drop it off. Fine, whatever. I bring the car into the dealership. The dealer says that they don't have a repair shop. They recommend me going to somebody else. Fine, I bring it to the Porsche recommended auto body shop. It took them like 4 weeks to even get the estimate up to $27,000. And at that point, we're going back and forth with Turo. Yeah, $27,000 for a bumper cover, a light. It turned out to be much more than that. But that's what the quote was. I was like, man, this is really getting out of hand. They also were charging a premium on their labor because of the type of vehicle that it was. And Turo's insurance company wasn't going for it at all. They were like, nope, this is already too high. And at that point, I was trying to push them to just total out the car. If they got the value, if they got the amount up to like 36,000, it would have qualified as a total loss and I would have just been done with it. But they refused to go up in price. And then I got recommended to another body shop. The car sat there for another 7 weeks. And then I go to pick up my car. And also, there's one other thing that I forgot to mention. Since the first 2 rentals went well, I actually lowered the insurance coverage that I had on Turo. So I had a higher deductible. So instead of having a $250 deductible, I had a $2,000 deductible. And it was that rental that crashed. So anyway, that's what happened. So I get the car back. I'm driving it around for 1 day. All of a sudden, I smell antifreeze. My car is leaking antifreeze, overheating on the road. I got to pull over, get it towed back to the shop. Again, another $3,000 of damage because there was like a radiator line that was going, because it's a Porsche, the engine's in the back, that was running through the front to the radiator that had a little crack in it that wasn't replaced because they thought it was in good condition, but it was leaking antifreeze. So after about 3 months of not having the car, I get the car back and I decided, you know what? Maybe I was just unlucky. Maybe there's hope on the other side of this Turo thing. Negative. So after I got the car back, I decided to give it one more chance. And I also figured I'd lease out my vehicles to my Airbnb guest. I thought I'd be a little bit smarter about what I was doing. And instead of having the car posted up at the garage, I was like, I'm gonna start having pickups and drop-offs from my Airbnb property. And instead of just promoting the car on Turo, I'm going to promote the vehicle to all my Airbnb guests who book in my Fort Lauderdale location. That way, if they're coming to Fort Lauderdale, you have to have a car. So I was like, you know what, rather than them book a flight, then a separate hotel on Airbnb, and then a separate car from a rental company, I might make it easier for my guests so that they could just use one of the vehicles at my home, especially when I'm out of the country, because I have 2 cars available. So I put not only the Porsche on Turo, I decided I was gonna put my family vehicle on there as well. So the cars are being picked up and dropped off from my Airbnb, and which is also my home. And things were going okay, until I had this one guest that was a little strange. Every time that I would try to contact him, he would never answer the phone call, but would only respond by text message, which I thought was kind of strange, but whatever, I let it go. He had rented my SUV, and on the day that he was supposed to bring it back, he was late. So I started contacting him and saying, dude, you're late. I actually had one of my Airbnb guests who were supposed to have that vehicle for rent. They're contacting me. It's 12 o'clock now. The guy hasn't showed up. So I'm starting to put pressure on this dude, telling him, you need to get the car back and you need to get it back ASAP. I have other people depending on it. He was like, well, I contacted Turo and I booked for an extra day. I don't understand why this is happening. I was like, I never approved that extra day because I had the car blocked. So I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, well, I'm contacting Turo. I was like, no, you need to speak to me because you're the one that has the car. And it's my car. So it doesn't matter what Turo says. I need the car back now. He's going back and forth. I said, look, if the car is not at my house in 30 minutes, I'm calling the police and I'm reporting it stolen. Of course, the guy shows up, drops the car off. And instead of me being sensible at that time, I told him, hey, I got my other vehicle that's available. If you need a car for a few extra days, I'll rent you that one. He's like, fine. Rents it, takes my other car, the Porsche. Anyway, everything goes well. Brings the car back supposedly on time, and it was also the same day that I had an Airbnb turnover. It was going well until one day my assistant reported that my car that was just returned from a rental was gone. Yep, some dirtbag coordinated the drop-off and theft of my Porsche. So my assistant who helps me out with my Airbnbs was at the house. So I had both cars, one that was just rented and the Porsche that's in question today, both at home. And I was like, you know what, my assistant is turning over the apartment. I'm gonna get her to take care of the turnover of the vehicles. So she goes and she takes my SUV to the car wash. She brings it back and she sends me a photo that the car's clean. And I was like, well, what about the other car? And she was like, what other car? And I was like, yeah, the Porsche, the guy just dropped it off. He sent me a picture, it was parked right there. She was like, no, I haven't seen it. She was like, from the time that I came out the house to bring the SUV to the car wash, I haven't seen the Porsche all day. And I was like, nah, no way. Let me contact this guy. Maybe he needed it to kind of do something or he forgot to get gas. So let me reach out to him. He doesn't answer. I was like, okay, that's kind of strange. Now I start asking my other Airbnb guest, maybe he took the car, right? No, he didn't take the car. I asked my operations manager who had just been in the city and she knows that I rent a car. So I was like, did she borrow my car? No, she didn't borrow my car. So I reported the car stolen and maybe, I don't know, it took about 3 weeks. And I was like, you know what, the car is gone. I figured that I got pulled into a scam just because the guy's account ended up getting blocked. He wasn't being responsive when there was issues with Airbnb. I mean, there was issues with Turo. And I figured that they must have been running some sort of scam operation where they steal the vehicles, immediately put them on a cargo truck, ship it overseas, car is gone. So I was like, okay, this car is out of my life. It's gone. That's it. You know, no more pain with this car because the first dude who crashed it, all right, out of my life. Now it's stolen. It's probably on a boat somewhere to God knows what country. I'm never gonna see the car again. And to make matters worse, my insurance company was telling me that they probably aren't going to cover it. And since I did that transaction outside of Turo wasn't covering it either because I had exchanged the car with the same jerk that returned my other car late. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, I'm about to be really screwed here. Fortunately for me, this idiot is a 19-year-old kid who decided to keep the car and just, hang out in Miami. And the cops picked him up, recovered the car, and the car was actually in good condition. So that's like the silver lining to the story is that I got this cursed car back, but I decided I'm done with Turo.
And what happened with that guy?
He got arrested. He got arrested. I think he might have spent like 30 days in jail and is out. In my opinion, Turo sucks. I wouldn't recommend it to any of my friends or anyone following me on YouTube to even bother with that as a business model. The things that make being a Turo operator difficult is that it's not a highly profitable operation, right? You have your car payment, you have your insurance, you have the cut that Turo takes. So you're gonna be personally insured, naturally, you're gonna have auto insurance on your car. And Turo takes like 70 or 75, no, you get paid out 70% if you have the best insurance option and like 90% if you go with the high deductible option. And that's what happened with me. I went with the high deductible option because I was like, you know what, what's the probability of something really going wrong that's gonna be a major event? It was like little nicks on the bumper I could deal with. But a real accident, I was like, nah, I don't think that's too likely. So getting a little greedy and not wanting just 70% of a payout, I went with the 90% option. Bad idea. Either way, Turo also sets like recommended prices for the vehicle. Now this car I'm paying about $1,000 a month for. The insurance I think is maybe like $300 or so. So it's $1,300. So in order for me to break even, I had to have this car at like $100 a day payout and rented like 15 days out of the month. And my typical rental was like 3 days and just the weekends. So I barely was like scratching even when I had the car rented. Turo is recommending that I lower my price and I could get more bookings, but then that means more wear and tear, more turnovers, dealing with more people. I was like, I didn't want to deal with all that. So in the end, it was like not much of a profit and still a lot of work. Compared to Airbnb, for instance, where I might have 3 days or 4 days out of the month not rented, and low maintenance sort of tenants, no real disasters, no house parties. That's like something that has really been weeded out of Airbnb. It just is more worth it to do an Airbnb rental than having all that liability of a car potentially being stolen, all of the maintenance, all of the things that could go wrong, the scratches, the damage, the late returns. It's just completely different. Also, if you're managing these yourself, you have to bring the car to the car wash or wash it yourself. That's gonna take you, what, an hour of your time? So whatever an hour of your time is worth, let's just say an hour of your time is only worth $30 an hour, right? Deduct that from your rental price because that's time wasted that you're not being reimbursed for. So again, that for me, that's totally not worth it. So I'm sitting here either driving to the car wash, waiting in line at the car wash, getting it washed, paying a price for that, getting it ready. Listen, there's no way that this makes sense for any gainfully employed person and they're just running one vehicle. The pain points here are that it's just too much maintenance. You got irresponsible people, maybe people that the rental car companies won't rent to because of driving history or age or I don't know, maybe credit worthiness. All of these things are things that essentially make it difficult to operate the vehicles. And at least with a home, like on Airbnb, it's stationary. You don't have to go find it, it's there, right? And there's neighbors and there's people who are kind of looking after your property. It's just a totally different beast when comparing the peer-to-peer vacation rentals to peer-to-peer car rentals. Now, if you are convinced that Turo isn't worth it and you still want to take the hassle and risk and still press on, here are my suggestions for what you should do if you want to have your own fleet. The first thing I want to suggest is that you need to have volume. You need to have multiple cars on the road at all times. I'm talking about having a minimum of like 20 cars, yielding at least $50 a day. The other thing that you want to consider is having a dedicated assistant for turnovers and interactions with your guests. It won't be worth it any other way. Third tip is invest in cars with tracking and monitoring equipment. If you're renting Teslas, the markup is quite high, and these cars have tons of software to manage your fleet better. The fourth thing that you want to consider is having a dedicated lot near an airport or a popular pickup and drop-off point. So these tips that I gave you were really the result of me renting out my car for a while. I thought if this is going to work anyway, I can't be involved with any of the communications. I can't be dealing with any of the management and maintenance of the cars. And I'm gonna wanna have these cars managed by an individual. If I had a parking lot or a property that had plenty of parking spaces and somebody that can manage the key transfer, or maybe even like a kiosk that will allow me to capture a picture of the person who's bringing the car, maybe have like a toll gate that's activated by a device in the vehicle. I would do things a completely different way so that all the turnovers are handled for an affordable price. All of the vehicles are concentrated in one area that's easy for pickups and drop-offs, and that I have a person who's physically available during the pickup and drop-off times to establish a sort of presence and get a certain read on the people. I was kind of managing this fleet similar to my Airbnbs, where I have a responsible person or responsible people who handle the turnovers, and it's also worth it. Like, for an Airbnb, I might pay $100 to $150 for an apartment turnover, and I also could bill that to the person who's renting. With Turo, you don't have a turnover fee. And if you did, you can't charge a car cleaning fee of $100. It just wouldn't make any sense. So what am I gonna charge, $20? Nobody's gonna get out of their house, drive to your location, and wash your car by hand for $20. That's gonna be highly unlikely. And if they did, they most likely are very young and or irresponsible and can't maintain a job that's even worth it for them to do. So all of the suggestions that I'm making are the only way that I could see someone finding success. I've seen people who start with one vehicle and immediately realize that the game has to be volume, and they do spool up in volume. But again, you're investing in these properties that are depreciating assets, constantly need maintenance, constantly are at high risk of accidents. Like, automobile insurance can be just as high as homeowners insurance, which to me doesn't make sense. Well, it makes sense because the liability and the risk is higher on automobiles than it is in something catastrophic happening to your home. Actually, my automobile insurance is more than my plane insurance, which for some people is quite a shocker. So that tells you in itself that there's inherent risk in an automobile being used and operated by people, and accidents happen all the time. So the only way that I can see you hedging against all of the things that makes Turo intolerable is by doing it, as I said, multiple cars on your fleet, somebody who's managing things day to day, and making enough money on volume that you can pay an employee to manage that operation responsibly, so it's not your problem. So if you have good credit and you have the financial means to maybe put down around $75,000 to get this business started, it might eke out a few $1,000s a month for you and be a profitable business. But for me, it just didn't seem worth the liability, the time, taking on the additional debt that I decided to say later. I hope you got some valuable information here. I won't be renting cars anytime soon, but if you're interested in a side hustle that is less of a headache, less cost, and better margins, I highly recommend Airbnb as an option. Please like this video if you found it helpful, and share it with anyone that you know that's been considering Turo as an option. Don't forget to subscribe and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss a thing. Thanks again for joining me here at ENTP Life. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.